Welcome to today's episode of What the Feels, where we talk about movies, books, shows, and other media and the mental health topics they may or may not explore. My name is Britta Talamantis, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Texas. I specialize in working with kids and teens and specialize in grief, anxiety, ADHD, and life transitions. Today on the podcast, for the third time in a row, we have our friends Meagan and Bailee here to talk about the book series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And today we are wrapping it up. We are so excited. So Meagan and Bailee, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank
Round three.
you.
Round
Let's do
three,
it.
we are
Yeah.
ready. We are ready to jump into A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is our beautiful little Christmas episode. So again, we are going to have spoilers. If you have not read this book series, now is your time to pause here, go read it. If you haven't read it, like, what are you doing with your life? So pause here.
If you're on part three, we very
Yeah, if
much
you're on
hope
part
that
three,
you've read
like,
them.
okay, like, let's go. So here we go. So Court of Frost and Starlight, beautiful little Christmas special. It took me till like halfway through to be like, nothing bad is gonna happen
I
in
know,
this
I kept
book.
kind of waiting for a shoe to drop.
Right. Because very traditional Sarah J. Maas style, last 100 books or 100 pages of every book is like mass chaos.
Mhm.
And so I'm just like holding my breath like halfway through this book. I'm like, wait, maybe this is just our like breather.
Mhm.
And it was just beautiful. And I love Christmas. So just this being the winter solstice book, and they're like decorating for the holiday, and we have Farrah's birthday being on winter solstice. It was just like, this is what life gets to be like now that they've won this war. And they
Mhm.
get to just like, we see everybody and how they're slowly starting to come out of survival mode. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how everybody's starting to react to that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a nice, I think plenty of people could say, what was the point of having this book? It's so short. Why did we need it? But I think that there is something very sweet and very important about like allowing for the good times to roll, and acknowledging, celebrating the rest time, the relief time, um, and just kind of enjoying in like we just did a ton of hard work. We just all nearly died or had these
Hmm.
very close encounters with death or just had a lot of shit going on. And so
Hmm.
let's just enjoy the breather that we get. And I don't know that we always take enough time to do that. We're always like waiting for the shoe to drop, waiting for the next thing to
Right.
happen, trying to prepare for it. So it's
Mhm.
nice to just take a breather.
Well, and like Reese has had, 50 years under the mountain.
Mhm.
His inner circle has had 50 years of waiting for him. Um, Farrah hasn't had quite this long, but she did have all of the trauma under the mountain. And she had the trauma before that of like just surviving, trying to provide for her family. Her sisters have had the trauma of um going into the cauldron and then adjusting to the life of the fairies. And then they all went through this war together, fighting Hybern and all thinking they were going to die at some point. The sister's dad has died, and we see all of them grieving all of these things in very different ways. And
Mhm.
we see kind of Farrah adjusting to her High Lady of the Night Court life without war. We see her adjusting to like, hey, we have money, but being very frugal about it, which I think is great. And like wanting to just get an assistant and like, is that okay? Um, and we see Nesta just starting to crumble. In our last episode, we were talking about kind of the dings in her armor a little bit and where we start to see her traumas kind of come up, and we see that Nesta is falling apart. Um, and everyone else is just trying to like move forward with life of just like, okay, we went through this thing. We're gonna have winter solstice. We're gonna have a big party, and we're gonna keep going. But for I feel like Nesta is hurting the most, but you've kind of see I like how we see kind of the coping skills of Farrah and how she's
Mm.
been painting. Does she has the art studio already at this point. Like she's gotten her art
Yeah, because
studio.
I think so, because I'm pretty sure she's there like
for
up
part of it.
until, yeah, like 2 days before solstice, and she's invited by, I forget the fairy who invites her to come paint with them, but that's in this book, right?
Yeah, I think so. And so we kind of see her start to express herself again through painting that she couldn't find in the spring court, but really just starting to work through um her feelings through paint and art in a very healthy way. And so everyone's starting to work things out. We see more kind of taking time at the end in this ranch. I would describe it as a
Yeah,
ranch, but I'm from Texas, but like
she has some acres and horses.
yeah, and horses, like who knew? And so she's taking time at the end um to take some time on this land that nobody knows she has. But then they're also doing all of these traditions that are normal and important to them that Reese hasn't been able to be a part of for the last 50 years with the snowball fight and going up to the cabin and all of these fun things and just being with their inner child being 500 years old. And I think that's really awesome.
Yeah. I think well, I love to see the gift giving. I think it's
Mm,
always so fun to see like what each character gives and receives and how they've picked it out. I also think it's interesting to know, I mean, so we're filming this mid-October.
yeah.
I wonder if either of y'all are talking with clients about upcoming holidays and traditions and things like that. And
Hmm.
um, one of the things that I have been talking about with several clients is what it's like to join a family and their traditions,
Hmm.
and when that does or doesn't feel quite comfortable or familiar to you. And so I think it's interesting to see how the inner circle carries on with traditions that they haven't been able to do for 50 years, but how the three Archeron sisters join in or don't join in to varying degrees and kind of either jump into the traditions, or like Elaine really goes all into the baking aspect and being very hands-on in preparations. Farah and Cassian get super drunk and decorate the place. And with the gift giving, there's varying degrees of how much Elaine and obviously Nesta partake or don't partake. But I think it's just interesting to witness what it looks like for some people on varying degrees of how to join in a new family's
Hmm.
traditions.
Hmm. Yeah, I've started talking about just because, I specialize in grief and as we head into the holiday season, especially for families that this is their first holiday season without their person who died, like there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. And
Yeah.
for the Archeron sisters, this is their first holiday as fairies. This is their first holiday season without their dad. And some of them have pretty complex feelings about their dad, but it is their first um, winter solstice without him. So I think they're dealing with that all in different ways. And so, yeah, there's a lot of conversations in my office around that right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a conversation about that even just at a networking event this morning, not even with clients even necessarily, but just with anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to come up. I know it's coming up for me of having to negotiate holidays when it's not just joining a new family, but then, you know, having to, like, with my sister and my brother-in-law living in another state, and then we're trying to coordinate with them, and all of this has started happening in the summertime. We're like, are you coming here? Are we going there? How
Mm-hmm.
long are you going to be there? And
Mm-hmm.
then, oh no, I don't get to spend Christmas with my parents. I have feelings about that. I have both of them, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't get to spend the holiday with them. So there's just like it's a lot of feelings that come up around the holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I'm really glad to see these characters that I've grown an attachment to. Just
For
seeing
sure.
them in the holidays is so great
Mm-hmm.
because when we grow an attachment to characters, we want whatever we can get from them, right? Like that's why there are holiday episodes on TV shows. It's like
Mm-hmm.
nothing is really happening. I just like watching you guys. It's just, I think it was soothing for my nervous system to read that book
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, okay, this is the bridge between the first three that we've read and the start of the other Archeron sisters' stories. I think this is a nice kind of closing and seeing certain characters really settle in to their life to where they don't have to be in the lead role anymore.
Mhm.
Someone else is taking the lead.
Well, and it's the first book
That's
that we get chapters from different characters' perspectives too, which is fun. That,
Mhm.
yeah, segues into Silver Flame.
Mhm.
And I feel like the main thing that is wrong in Frost and Starlight is we, as you said, Brenna, we start to see Nesta really crumble. We see her very strong reaction to Cassian trying to give her a gift and like kind of just reach out his hand for that initial time, and
Mhm.
how strongly she reacts and just rejects any of the merriment really, that I feel
Yeah.
like is a, yeah, perfect segue into like, golly, what is going on under the surface with her? And then you get a whole freaking book of
Right.
figuring that out.
Right.
Mhm.
And then, but like, just, and this is a perfect segue. The only thing I want to touch on then before we go, and it's more of a, it's not a mental health thing. It's just a conspiracy theory of like, what is the shadow that is watching more? Is it
Okay, so
Veraxis
I
or
think
is
it's
it one of
Bryaxis.
Asriel's shadows? What is it?
Oh.
That's,
But she said it felt eerie,
yeah.
right? I really like Bryaxis.
Yeah.
I imagine Bryaxis as a she, mainly
Okay.
because the house's energy feels like a she, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it could be Bryaxis because we don't know where she went, where it went, but it does feel like something that has a darkness to it, but also
Sure.
like just wanted to be a part of things, you know, like
Yeah.
wanted to help the war, wanted to kind of be acknowledged and have a friend.
Yeah.
Which at times I feel like that's how Moore is. Like she's so in the thick
Hmm.
of things, but also the fact that she needs this retreat to her land to just be by herself and decompress a bit. And there is a part
Hmm.
of her that isn't really seen by anyone except now Thera. I feel like there is some sort of kindred something there. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when I read it the first time, I'm like, oh, that's Bryaxis for sure. But then, you go down rabbit holes down s- the Akatar TikTok sides of TikTok. They're like, oh, it could be Azrael Shadows. I'm like, maybe. But
Yeah, they
obviously,
both
the
make
first
sense.
time I read it, I'm like, oh, it's Bryaxis. But um, especially now that they're like, who's going to be the traitor in book 6? Who knows? Um, I'm just, I can't believe we have to wait till 2026 now. I,
Is that the official, like, has she released the date that it's done?
No, but there was an announcement not too long ago that was like the date's now been pushed back to like end of 2025, early 2026. And we thought it was going to be like early 2025, like around the Onyx Storm time period, because we're getting
Mm,
Onyx Storm in January. Thank
nice.
goodness, because my
Pre-ordered.
brain is gonna explode. But um, yeah, so now we have to wait.
Oh.
So, but that just means it's gonna be really good. So it's fine. We
Also,
can
I
wait.
do want to touch on the fact I just was watching a clip or reading something from her that, and maybe this is a good way to jump into Silver Flame,
Yeah.
that when she wrote Silver Flame, she said that a lot of Nesta's journey and her experiences mental health wise reflects a lot of what Sarah J. Maas was going through
Mm,
at that time, or perhaps just before, I don't know, but she says that she put a lot of her own experience and like inner turmoil into Nesta's experience, which just
mhm.
goes to show that, like, yes, she has pumped out an amazing number of books, greatly
Yeah,
written, and also somewhere in that time was going through something really difficult.
sure.
And so now I'm just thinking, like, man, okay, if she's pushing back the sixth book, there must be a good reason for it. The book is going to be
Absolutely.
amazing, but also she could still be really struggling with who knows what. But
Absolutely.
I just thought it was an interesting little fact that, like, Nesta's story is so personal for her.
Yeah. And if that's the case, we hope she's taking the time she needs and getting
Yes,
whatever she
absolutely.
needs. And we hope that she is climbing that mountain with help,
Hmm.
and hope that she's taking a retreat in said
Hmm.
mountain, like that's
Yeah,
pretty and like
yeah.
taking some time for herself.
Yeah.
We
Totally.
can wait.
We will wait.
We will
We'll
wait.
still be here.
And so if that's the case, we hope she's getting all the things she needs. But yeah, so jumping into Silver Flame. So we see in A Frost of in Starlight that like everyone is doing their best. Everyone's struggling a little bit. Everyone is doing their best. We are working through things. Everyone is doing their thing. Nesta is falling apart. I think everyone is concerned for Nesta. I think everyone um has a different approach in how to like not handle, but like for a lack of a better word right now, of like what they should do when it comes to Nesta. And as we see kind of at the beginning of Silver Flame is like Farah has been trying to not be overbearing and trying to not be High Lady of the Night Court in this situation and not be overbearing and tell her what to do and be like, you should be doing this, because she doesn't want to be that way with her sisters. But we see at the beginning of Silver Flame that Cassian is picking her up at her real yuck's apartment, that she has had a big old night out on the night court tab and
Mm-hmm.
she has had all the drinks and took home a guy, and Nesta is not doing great. And what we find out, I think fairly quickly, is that Nesta finds her way of escape through having some drinks, and she enjoys music, and that's how she's coping with her trauma. Um, and although I think music is a very, very positive coping skill, perhaps drinking and to get drunk all the time, not the best. That is not our best coping skill. And so she is getting picked up because she is going to the river house to have
Get a
some
talking to.
choices. Yep, she's going to get offered some choices. And Farah doesn't really want to offer those choices, but she also recognizes that um they're the only two choices left. And I think that this is something that a lot of families that have had um family members with addiction or with some big mental health struggles, that this is something a lot of families probably identify with, of like, we don't want to give you this ultimatum, but we have to because we love you. Because
Yeah.
we see that you're struggling, and we think that one of these two choices is what's going to be best, and we hope that you take this choice because we think this choice is going to help you, but this is the alternative. um and so she is offered to be taken up to the House of Wind to go train at the Illyrian camps with Cassian, and then to go work in the library that is below the House of Wind, or to be sent back to the human lands. And so
Yeah.
she goes to the House of Wind with no way to get down except the 10,000 steps. Dun
Yeah.
dun dun.
I do feel like, as you said, probably a lot of families or even partners can
Sure.
feel like they've gotten to that place where they don't know what else to do except to provide an ultimatum. And yeah, I think Farah's perspective at the beginning is like wanting to give Nesta space because Farah would have wanted space or really needed space at the time. And she didn't like when people really pushed her or hounded her to talk about things she wasn't ready to.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's just kind of trying to give that same type of space and respect and autonomy to Nesta. But I feel like it can be very difficult as a loved one to watch someone that you care about um, continue to make poor choices on their own. And it's like, I want to give you as much respect, space, and autonomy as possible. But when you continuously abuse those things or take advantage of my care for you or the money that we're offering you or anything like that, um it feels like, and I don't know that it's true, but it feels
Mm-hmm.
like they aren't capable of making a good choice by themselves right now, and they need
Mm-hmm.
that pressure or the ultimatum. If that's I don't think that that is the only way to go about that, but it makes a lot of
Sure.
sense why a lot of families find themselves in that place. And I think even thinking about Farah's perspective of how difficult that must be
Yeah.
to realize that your way isn't working and is really just allowing them to like dig themselves into a deeper hole, and having to release that idea of their healing journey and be like, okay, I guess I do have to kind of submit to this other possibility. And um, I know that Farah feels like some guilt in that as
Mhm.
well. So thinking about it from all sides of the family is hard.
Yeah, and everybody has a different feeling about the
Mhm.
situation. Like Reese is just done. Farah has a lot of confused feelings. I think Cassian probably has like the most empathy in the situation, just like, I don't know what's best for you right now. Amren's kind of like, girl, get your life together. Um, in that girl by way of hers. um,
I think it's
but
easy to see how Reese ends up like being so done with her, because he's probably the person that hears everything about how Farah is processing this and handling it.
mhm,
And then
mhm,
so his feeling is probably about watching his mate struggle
mhm,
so much and
mhm.
watching her
Yeah.
deal with the impact of how Nesta responds to her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I feel like in a very kind of typical overprotective partner response of like, I see my person feeling this way. You are the cause of this current pain. Therefore, I'm taking away the current pain. This is how we're dealing with the situation because
Mhm.
I don't want my partner to be in pain anymore. Um, so there's lots of complex feelings just in this first just in these first
Yeah.
chapter or two. There's a lot going on. I think Cassian, and we kind of figure out why, later, but I think he most understands and picks up on the fact that like Nesta doesn't think very much of herself. And I think he's the one that understands it the quickest. Maybe the others can maybe Farah can kind of see it and is just not saying it, but I think that Cassian understands it. Um, Maybe more quickly of just like she thinks very little of herself. And I think because he sees the state of her apartment, he sees how she's been taking care of herself. He sees how the caliber of Fae men she's been bringing home, and um how she's been out all the time. And so I think that he has that empathy of just like she doesn't think very much of herself right now. And so he's trying to have that compassion from that empathetic point of view of like, guys, like let's not be so hard. Like I can kind of see where she is and where her mental health is at this point. Um
Yeah, like trying to be really patient with her
mhm.
because of his understanding. Which, okay, I have very few, but some, I
Yeah.
think, most helpful uh, quotes or passages that
Yeah.
highlight. So you're talking about Nesta just does not feel very well about herself.
Mhm.
So for those reading along, this is page
Yes.
78. This is, I think, perhaps the first time that she has gone to the library and she's meeting
Mhm.
Clotho, whatever. So Nesta, um, this is her thoughts. I am worthless and I am nothing. I hate everything that I am, and I am so, so tired. I'm tired of wanting to be anywhere but in my own head. And that was just like her thought reaction to Clotho considering her and meeting her. And just to have those types of thoughts about yourself, I'm worthless, I'm nothing, I don't want to be in my head, I don't want to be. And I think that like her drinking, her sex, her spending money is
Mhm.
like these attempts to get out of her own being and like get out of her mind, get out of her feelings, and just kind of numb herself. And like the
Mhm.
music, even, it just kind of takes over her mind and her body so that she can just forget what it's like to be her.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that in many other places in the book, we get this very raw insight into her thoughts about herself and her actions and her guilt for not saving her father and for being such an ass to her family and all of these things that like gives us a very real look and possibly relatability if anyone has felt those similar thoughts to themselves of like what it looks like to be so low, so
Mm-hmm.
depressed, so just like angry with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I have a
Mm-hmm.
note on that too, that I think part of her coping was also dealing with the magic that would rise within her, not just her view of herself, but like I noted in the book that it said like panic panic would make the magic rise in her that she needed to temper. And so the way she was trying to cope with that and temper that like magic that she didn't understand or know how to use was with listening to music and wine and sex and probably dissociating. She's probably dissociating from it, but she
For
didn't know
sure.
how to temper it.
And probably like scared of it because she doesn't know anything about it.
And if you think about it, like how many examples do we have of how the guys handle when they need like a release from their magic? They fight each other
Right.
and they can sense it. They know it about each other. Like when after the cabin, when Reese comes back and the mating bond has been accepted, and Cassian's like, "Oh, he needs to blow off some steam, or he's gonna explode." Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and then they fight it out, and so Nesta's trying to do that. It's just she's continuing to spiral because they're not adaptive or healthy ways of coping. Maybe the music is, but that's wrapped up with so many other things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, she's got a lot going on. She's got a lot going on. And the way that, this choice that's offered to her ends up balancing physical, like getting a physical workout in and then having a sense of purpose and ending up meeting friends and people that she can connect to at the library because everybody who all of the priestesses that work at the library work there because they too have been through traumatic events, and many of them don't talk, but she ends up meeting Gwen and connecting with Gwen, who has a very traumatic experience. And we actually hear of Gwen's story. And we heard about what happened to Gwen actually in book 2. Um,
Mhm.
we just didn't know it
uh,
until the end of this
we just
book.
didn't know it. And so her temple was actually one of the temples that was raided because they had one of the pieces of the cauldron that Hybrid was trying to put together. And so that's when she was brought to the library by Reese / Asriel and more. We just see more pieces of Reese and like how he is taking care of people and um as he further lets his mask down and how he's always been this caring person. He just didn't let anybody know.
Mm.
Um but she connects with Gwen, and all of these priestesses have been through something hard, and so has she. And so they have her go through a physical workout to, that is a great positive outlet to like get out some of this frustration, this energy. It's good for her body. She starts feeling stronger day by day. She starts feeling proud of herself, of how well she's doing. And then she gets um to connect with these women that have been through similar, not the same, but similar hard things. And so they actually, this inner circle family puts her in places that are going to help her feel self-worth. My hope is they did that on purpose. But I guess they did. And they knew what this would do for her, but maybe not to the extent that it
Yeah.
actually did. I think it was kind of convenient, but Nesta then took it to what it was, and um she ended up connecting to, in the Illyrian camp, she connected to, I forgot her name.
Emery.
Emery. Yes. And so she connects to an Illyrian warrior who's had her wings clipped, and then she has Gwen, the priestess, and um she creates the beautiful bonds and friendships out of these things. And she does that herself.
Mhm.
They put her in this situation, but she does all of that herself.
we see how they get close through this training. They all have a
Mm-hmm.
place to come together and they kind of have a common goal together. And then you start to see them healing communally together.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
And
really
I think
beautiful.
it's interesting that they don't know each other's stories until
Mm-hmm.
like the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that that's something that Nesta thinks about often in the library, that yes, there is a sort of kinship with the other women and priestesses in the library, but she also feels very much, and I think so many, I myself do this, she compares her pain to theirs of like, I'm so much worse than them because I'm the one who did wrong and these women have had wrong done to them. And so I do feel like there is a bit of discrediting her own
Mm-hmm.
experiences in the presence of the priestesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it honestly, like, I think she always feels guilt and shame and
Mm-hmm.
blame about her story. But then when she does finally share it with Gwen and Emery, I think it's like in the blood right, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're at the
That
very, very end.
yeah, and it wasn't until she shares it that I don't remember if they say this, but I get the sense of like her learning that it's not your fault and you don't need to feel shameful about this. Like wrong was done
And they tell
to
her
you very
outright.
much.
Like
Okay,
she
they do
hears
tell her.
that from people that she has this strong relationship with that she
Mm-hmm.
trusts so
Mm-hmm.
much. And they just tell her outright, like, it's not your fault.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And she needed
Mm-hmm.
so badly to hear that, but maybe not from someone that's connected to her, like maybe not from her sisters or from like it needed to be people who chose to be her friend,
Mm-hmm.
saw
Mhm.
something in her.
And people who she chose back
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
because she would, because she was kind of thrust into this fairy world. And so, I mean, yeah, she had her sisters and she's always been like fiercely protective of Elaine and things. But at this point, she's like, Elaine has chosen Farah. Like she's feeling pretty betrayed by Elaine at this point.
Yeah.
So she doesn't even feel like she's got Elaine in her corner. And so these people that she has chosen and they have chosen her back. Um, and so that's more powerful to her than anything.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, but even, it takes a very long time. And even though she's starting to feel confident and starting, I mean, we're this like how many pages is that book? It's like like
800.
800 some odd pages. But
Yeah.
we get like 500 or 600 pages in, and she like they have established their Valkyries. She's getting other priestesses to join them. She's helping other people be courageous, and she still doesn't believe in herself fully. Um,
Mhm.
she um she still doesn't trust the inner circle. She still doesn't know if this is where she belongs, and um she finds out that Farrah's pregnant, and that's very exciting. I do kind of miss I kind of strongly dislike that we don't get like the wedding between like Farrah and Rhysand, and that we kind of miss out on like some of these other important things just because I like Farrah and Rhysand so much. I'm like, wait, like I feel like we're glossing over some of these things, but I do love Nesta's story a lot too. Um, but we find out, and I forget how she finds out. Um, is it from Amryn? Is it from
I think
or
Well,
Cassian tells she's we find out
maybe they
somehow.
all find out together in the I
Okay.
think they all find out together in the river house. I forget why Nesta was brought down, but she was. And then they find out because she says from like the corner, like, congratulations. Like very
Yeah.
just quiet. But then it's in private just with Cassian that she finds out that the baby has wings,
hmm And that
which
no
then
one's
leads into the
telling
whole thing.
Farah.
Mhm.
And she and she kind of like feels that betrayal for Farah. And she's like,
Mhm.
why is no one telling her how bad this can be? Also, how do they not have like proper C-sections in Magic Fairyland?
Oh my
Like
God, I thought that the
the
whole time.
No
like
cell phones,
how
no surgeons.
how does
Yeah.
this not a thing that we have figured out, people? I don't understand.
It's for the drama,
Um,
just a little
I
sprinkle of
mean, yeah,
drama.
so Nesta can like have her moment, but like that this one of the things that just doesn't make sense. This magic does not compute in my brain. I can hop on boards to a lot of things, but um and so Nesta does not feel comfortable keeping this secret because she doesn't like how things are kept from her. And so she's kind of feeling like this betrayal moment for Farah. But something happened.
They get in a fight,
They get in a fight,
and
Yeah.
and
I
that's
think I think Nesta actually, like, although she doesn't think it's right, she
Hmm.
agrees to not tell Farah, and she's like, "Okay, you know what? Fine. Cassian
Yeah.
said that we're not telling her.
yeah,
We won't
And
tell
like
her."
everybody's researching, like they're trying to
Mhm.
figure it out. She's
They
like,
don't
okay,
wanna
okay.
stress her out
Yeah,
before
that's
it's
gonna make things
necessary,
worse.
but
Yeah.
her and Farah get in an argument, and now I'm forgetting what it was about, but
Because she
mm,
storms down, she makes it down the 10,000 steps, and something gets her down the 10,000 steps. It's something with her power. It's the swords. Okay, she Cassian takes her to the weapon maker,
yeah.
and they forge like the
She didn't know
so
she was imbuing it with power, but
yeah.
she
So
was.
she made those three weapons, and like the
a
next
new
day the
trove.
guy brings them to Reese and was like, I don't want these. And
Mhm.
so Amren's like, you can be you can rule Prithian, and Cassian's like, we have to tell Nesta, and Rhysand's like, absolutely freaking not. And so Cassian does this whole song and dance of, if you were to have a sword, what would you name it? And Nesta's not dumb. And she's like,
Yeah,
where the heck is this coming from? And so he kind of ends up telling her because he's sick of lying to her. Um, of just like, well,
poor Cassian.
he's like stuck between like he needs to be high, like loyal to his high lord, but also like he freaking loves Nesta. Except he never says it.
Does
Their
he?
mates.
Mm,
So this is like this whole other theory I've been going down the rabbit hole on
I don't know
social
if that makes.
media.
Yeah.
So
I don't
now
know. There's too many rereading it. It's like,
did he say I love you at any point in this book? Anyway, um, I think he loves her. I'm just gonna go with it. We're gonna roll with it. Like he cares for her.
he cares for her.
He cares for her.
Well, they're
So
mates, and I think he does
are
love her.
they?
I
What?
think they say that, but they say that, but it could go in another direction.
Are they mates? Okay,
They had the light
Bailee and
thing.
I were talking about last time how I do think there's a theory that Eris and Moore are mates, but are Cassian and Nesta mates? I don't know.
Okay, let's come
Because we
back to
didn't
that.
see the mating ceremony and he rejected the thing at the end.
Yeah, and
Let's come back.
also,
Let's come back because
yeah.
Anyway,
we
it's
have
a
a
whole
limited
rabbit hole.
time.
I know. Okay, so anyway,
Um,
Cassian cares for her. He's sick of lying, and he's just like, okay, you made these things. And Ness is like, WTF, bolts her booty
anyone
down
tell
those
me?
10,000
Yeah.
stairs. She figures out she goes to Amren because at some point, um, she's like, Amren's gonna tell me all these things. Farah is at Amren's. And so she looks at Farah as like, they're all lying to you. And your baby's gonna kill you.
And she does it
And your baby
spitefully.
has
She's mad.
wings. And she does it out of spite.
She's mad, yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
she knows how bad that is that she just did that, and Reese is like,
I
get her.
think she immediately feels horrible.
she does. And she's like, wait,
Yes.
and she knows immediately, I shouldn't have done it like that. And Reese, mating bond, tells Cassian, get her the hell out of this city. So Cassian like swoops her up gets Azriel, packs him a bag, they go to a mountain, and it is a healing and transformational experience for Nesta because I mean that's when Cassian kind of figures out about the fire and the crackling and the
Yeah,
neck.
she
I mean
brings
those are all trauma PTSD responses. Like she can't be
right.
around fire because the crackling reminds her of her dad's neck snapping. That is a very
Mm-hmm.
normal like PTSD like kind of trigger, like that's a very normally written experience. And
Yeah.
um
Can I say something about the therapeutic journey
yeah,
that I see with Nesta? So like,
yeah,
so with PTSD and trauma, um, since that's like primarily what I treat, I feel like Nesta's story is.
yeah,
So I mean, I see that same kind of journey with a lot of clients where they'll start to make a lot of progress, but they still have vulnerabilities and they still have triggers. And a lot of the time we'll go, oh well, I'm just not getting better, but we have to kind of zoom out and look at ways in which they are getting better and stronger and recognize that those triggers and vulnerable moments will still happen, and it does not mean they're back at ground zero.
hmm
And
Mhm.
so that
For
is
sure.
that we could see that in Nesta's story. We know she's getting stronger. She's building friendships. She's not using those old coping skills anymore. She's developing new ones. The mindfulness, the ability to like still
Mind
herself,
stilling. Yeah.
feeling
hmm
her emotions, recognizing when she's getting elevated, and using techniques to bring herself back down. We see that later in the book. But
hmm
then she still does feel angry sometimes. She still does lash
sure,
out at times because she still does have some deep trauma and pain that rears its head from time to time. But that does not mean that she's back at ground zero when that happens.
absolutely,
But she definitely needed a chance to feel the full impact of what her lashing out does and how it makes her feel. And it does bring up the pain when she lashes out. It does not help, it brings up her pain, and she
yeah,
actually faces it, and she goes and does the hiking trip with
hmm
Cassian.
hmm
um
Yeah.
and she
and
needed that.
she
She needed to fully feel it and have that kind of break,
and verbalize it.
verbalize it, share it with someone instead of just lashing out at other people when it comes up within herself. Instead,
hmm
she shares with him, this is what's happening. This is what I have to deal with. And that was
hmm
part of her healing journey.
hmm
Well, and I think the other thing I've been thinking about is from the beginning of the book up until this hike and breakdown with Cassian, she's doing a lot. She's learning a
hmm
lot. She's growing a lot. She's building a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that all of those things really bring her to a place where she feels that she's able to verbalize everything that she's experiencing and talk about it with Cassian, even though she is kind of pushed to a breaking point, even physically on the hiking. But I was thinking about how if a client even just brought this up to me this week of the difference, the combo, the order of growth versus healing, and how the beginning of it, Nesta is growing a lot physically, feeling confident, feeling stronger, eating again, nourishing herself, learning mind stilling. She's adding a lot. And yet there's still this like sometimes what I refer to as like root rot beneath the surface of like all of her wounds, her trauma, that those things, while they are maybe she has coping skills to deal with it a little bit, she hasn't really uprooted any of the trauma yet fully. And then when she has this breaking point and verbalizing with Cassian, then she's digging everything up and she's like sharing and having someone in her corner knowing about all this stuff. So I don't think that there is a particular order it needs to happen in, but I do think that the combination of adding growth and strength and resilience and coping, as well as going back and looking at and unearthing all of the trauma and things that are plaguing her internally still. And
hmm
that's when you actually, like, from then on, that's when you start to see her be able to have a different reaction with her family and really work on some of the things like the fire crackling gets better, all those things. So I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts on
Well,
that?
so there's a quote that um kind of towards the end, she has this slight reconciliation. Well, she has a reconciliation with Amarin because at this point, she and Amarin have even fallen out.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, Amarin put a hand above Nessa's heart. She says, that's the key, isn't it? To know the darkness will always remain, but you choose how to face it, handle it. That's the most important part. To not let it consume, to focus upon the good, the things that fill you with wonder. She gestured to the stars zooming past. The struggle with that darkness is worth it just to see such things. So like our stuff is always going to be there. Our trauma is always going to be there. I talk about this a lot with like my my people who come in with grief. Our grief is always going to be there. Like it's been 24 years since my dad died. It's been almost 14 since my mom died. My grief is always going to be there. It comes out at different times and it comes out in different ways and it changes over time. And the way that my grief looked 24 and 14 years ago looks a lot different than it does now. But I cope with it and have different coping skills. I have my balance of, I call it my processing coping skills, whether that's therapy or talking about my grief and all of that versus my distraction kind of coping skills. Cause we have to have those of like, all right, we're going to work out. We're going to just listen to music. We're going to go hang out with our friends. So we have our balance. Sometimes we have to process and navigate our grief and our trauma and our big things. And sometimes then we just need to let it go and just go have some fun. Um, and these things are always going to be with us. It's how we choose to handle it.
Caveat, I have to
Yeah.
say, our trauma doesn't always have to stay the same though.
Right. Right.
The story might always be with us.
Yes.
But you might not always, like, for example, if you're somebody that has a PTSD diagnosis from your trauma, that doesn't mean
Sure.
you always meet the criteria for that
Sure.
diagnosis anymore
Yes.
as you do
Yes.
the work. And I always tell people grief and trauma are different. Like
Yes.
with my modality, EMDR, you cannot EMDR your way out of grief. You cannot.
No.
You can't. And it's always like, I like that jar where like, do you know
Yes.
the
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
visual
Yeah.
with we grow around the grief and the grief doesn't always take up as much space and it can kind
Right.
of shift and change and all of that.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, Meagan, I feel like every case is different depending on like where you start with growth versus healing. And in EMDR, we call it resourcing. And so the
Okay.
amount of resourcing work that we have to do, which is that growth work,
Okay.
looks different for every person depending on how many resources they already have. And so for Nesta, she had
It doesn't have a lot.
zero, nothing. Nesta didn't have any resources built up for her. A lot of her
Mhm.
relationships were in shambles.
Mhm.
So if we're looking at someone who's gone through trauma but has a really strong relationship with a partner or best friend or as someone they can lean on, that's one resource. That's one less
Mhm.
resource that we have to kind of build and instill. But you have to have resources to be able to do deep trauma work to get to the root, the root rot, like you said. You
Mhm.
have to have enough resources to where it doesn't completely destabilize you.
Mhm.
Um, and so she's doing that in training, physically getting stronger, building the friendships with Gwen and Emery, uh,
Mhm. And the
being the
house.
person and the
And the
house,
house.
the house. Oh my gosh, the house. Yes.
The house is her
Um,
friend.
yeah, and she's going and working in the library, so she's doing something with her time there. And she's the one that comes up with the idea for everyone else to come and do training too. Obviously, it's doing something for her. She's like, maybe these other women might want to come and do this as well. And she's
Well,
building
then, and
those
she joins them in their services and
yeah,
finds joy in their music and
yeah. Yes, yes. And so she's able to see a healthier version of a coping skill. You can still have
Mhm.
your music. When you pair it with reckless sexual behavior and drinking, maybe it's not working super well for you. You were deteriorating
Mhm.
from that sense, but you can still have music.
Mhm.
Maybe take those other parts out of it. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it's a great example of her having a lot of resources built, which we do in trauma work, we have to, so that the client isn't destabilized. And then she goes and has her reckoning with the root rot, if you will. And I think where it happens in the book is really important. I'm like, Sarah J. Maas, do you know something about trauma therapy, and have you been through it yourself? Because you're
Well, it sounds like maybe,
building a framework.
possibly.
Yeah, and so she already has a foundation, so she's able to come back from that. She's able to do what she needs to do to work through that root rot and share it with Cassie, and finally, and then come back and continue on the growth journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's beautifully done. It is a therapy book, I'm telling you. Like,
Yeah.
For sure.
Hey.
Yeah. And then, she gets her first ultimate test by they are taken for the blood right.
Forced. She is forced into
she's so she has this fight with Cassian because he's like, you're my mate, and for some reason she's like, I don't like that word.
He says, I'm shackled to you. He speaks negatively, and she reacts to that and is like, oh, you're stuck with me. Got it.
Yeah. So they have a fight, and she calls in her bargain and is like, don't come get me, and like all these things. So she gets more to take her to
yeah, I think she has more. Take her to
the Illyrian camp, take her to and Gwen ends up there too. So then they're all so then they're all taken for the blood right, and these 3 badass women make it,
freaking win it.
they
by the skin of their teeth.
Like Nesta gets almost to the top, but she sends those other 2. She goes, you get your butts up there and you touch that stone, because I've got to.
She's like, let me do this.
I've got to stand and guard this line. And she ends up fighting off the rest of the guys that have made it, that have been possessed by the trove. We didn't even talk about the trove, but there's this whole other thing going on with the trove.
But there's like the trove is part of the growth, and she's
right. She's finding, so she can like hear the trove, all these things, kind of like, Harry and Horcruxes. It's like a whole thing. She can find them. So that's kind of been part of her purpose, throughout the book. And Cassian, she discovers that Cassian has been taken by the queen that has part of the trove, and she is like, WTF, don't take him. And he ends up not killing her, not killing himself.
To kill her. Oh my god,
it's a whole thing. And he was like, it is so stressful. I'm gonna kill myself, and it's a whole thing. But then he like is able to fight back enough that he doesn't. It's a whole thing. They have a beautiful moment on the mountain, and then the blood rite ends. The other 2 get to the stone, and Mor and Azriel show up. They're like, the baby's coming, Farah's dying. It's a whole thing. Mind blown.
100 pages, man. Everything's going.
Everything happens. I'm like, how is everything going to be resolved? Because it's a Sarah J. Maas book, and like, how is everything going to fit?
And now we have the trauma for Nesta to work on, because she gets taken in the night and forced into. I mean, y'all, she traipsed around and was running around that area naked. Gave her clothes to her friend, and she's just like trying to survive. What? It was an
like animals. And like climbing these trees to stay away from animals and all these men who wanted to kill her. But normally there's no weapons in the blood right? And everyone's confused as to how there's weapons. Oh, because the queen was involved. Crazy madness. But whatever, they win. It's a whole thing. So they get back to the river house. Farah is dying. And Nesta's like, wait, I have an idea.
Well, but first, they find out that freaking Rhysand and Feyre made a pact.
At the end of Akawar, we're all going out together. So not only is Farah gonna die, Farah and Rhys are gonna die, and so is the baby. So everybody's gonna die.
So the amount of pressure on Nesta when she decides to use the mask and the heart, like she has the whole trove, and she decides, like, no, I'm changing something. I can't. I think it really goes back to her with her dad, that it was not her fault that her dad was killed.
No.
But she still feels like she didn't try enough, even in that split second that he was killed. And I really feel like this is her redeeming herself for like, I don't care what it costs me if I use the trove and it kills me, if it's too much for me, if I, go crazy because of it, whatever. at least I know I did something. And
Mhm.
praise the Lord, it all works out really fine and dandy.
The cauldron's
Um,
like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Nice break.
so what
it was a little chat.
she has these like, so what everyone is assuming is that her power is death, which is how she can hear all the death trope, whatever. And so she makes this bargain with the cauldron. I give it all back, just help me save them. And so she's able to change Farah's anatomy to
Mhm.
like,
And hers,
and hers,
which is
so that she
so
can have
fun.
Illyrian babies too,
Aha!
but not Elaine's, just hers and Farah's.
Keeping that in mind for the
Oh.
next book. Hmm.
Well, and we've got
Interesting.
Azriel and Gwen now, so
Oh,
Do we?
I I think
I'm
that
into it.
Elaine, I want her to be with Lucian.
Yeah. Well, because I think that Elaine's gonna end up being the in the spring court.
We have so many
And
theories.
okay, actually, my sister and I were talking about this because she just read the series for the first time, that the next book could be from Elaine's perspective
Mhm.
and Lucian's perspective, just like with Nesta and Cassian in this book. And she's going to go to the spring court, and there is where we're going to learn more of Tamlin's story and learn about all the history between him and Lucian from his perspective so that we understand Tamlin more.
Mm.
That's what I think.
I'm here for it. I
Mhm.
want some more backstory with Tamlin.
Well,
Also, don't
Sarah
you
J.
think
Maas
it's
has said
funny
that
that
she's
there's
going
like
to.
a Starlight Lake in the spring court? Isn't
Yeah,
that
that is
funny?
very
What's up with
kind
that?
of
Isn't
random
that
and like,
funny? And do we
yeah.
think that maybe his Reese's sister maybe lived there for a little while before she died?
Whoa, that's random.
What Easter eggs everywhere? Oh my goodness. I'm
I
clowning
have been
for
down a
all.
rabbit hole this week. Anyway, so
There's so
Nesta
much I feel like we
Nesta
haven't
has
talked about, but
I
there's
know.
just so much.
I know, but Nesta has this redeeming moment that she is able to save Farah, the baby. Magically, the baby was born so small and tiny, and after she makes this deal with the cauldron, aka the mother, who knows, all the things. The baby is the proper size and plump and so
Reminds me
healthy.
of Twilight when Bella turns into a vampire.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
like puffs up.
And Farah's just so happy that Nesta's there and present and just is like ready to be like sister again and just um and then Reese bows to nobody with his tattoos on his knees, and he bows to
He bows to
Nesta and
Nesta.
is like, thank you. And not even like saving his life, like, thank you for saving Farah and my baby. Like, and he's like showering her with gifts. Like, what else do you want? What can I give you? What else can I give you? And he's planning this huge mating ceremony for Cassian and Nesta because and I think that it's a beautiful moment at the end that um the three sisters go to Papa Archeron's not
Yeah,
grave, but where they have
his
marked a spot
memorial
in
kind of.
honor, a memorial, thank you, for him in the night court, and because Nesta had not been there yet, and that
Mm.
the sisters take the time to go, and she comes full circle. The pain's always
It's
going to be
very full
there.
circle.
The grief is always going to be there, but Bailee, it was a good point of like we want the PTSD symptoms to go away. We want those to she by the end she's able to have a fire in her room and not hear
That
the
is
sounds.
proof
That's
enough.
what we want.
That
Yeah,
I was
is
and
really
like
happy.
and coming from somebody like I've had PTSD symptoms. I've done the EMDR, like my grief is not going to go away, but I can deal with these other things. I don't flip out every time a phone rings. Like I can go like, "Oh, phone's ringing." And so that's the part that we wanted for her, and that she can feel a part of the family, and that she has purpose, and that she has drive, and that she has friends that she wants to be with, and um, it's beautiful. And so there's so many more things we could have talk
So
about,
many.
but this
I
book
think
is
we
so
covered it
dense
well.
and
I think we covered
um
it well. We did a good
yeah,
nice
this
sweep.
Yeah.
this whole series is just it's just so great. It has so many different perspectives, and there's so many characters that we could go on and on and on about. But I think that Sarah J. Maas does such a great job, especially with this book, of just the therapeutic. I think, Bailee, what you said of like the therapeutic process in general, of
Mhm.
how we take some steps forward. We have a step back. We take a couple steps forward, something happens, but it's just a very normal process. Healing.
Yeah.
I don't even use the word healing a lot just because
Yeah.
healing makes it seem like there's an end process, but like these are all things we're
Mm,
going to navigate for all of our lives. And so we
totally.
we it's just, life is a process, and our trauma and our grief and all of things is a process, and I think she does a great job at displaying that. And what's important is us rediscovering our resources and discovering, our found family and the people who love and support us and the things that help us cope. And that's
Yeah.
what this book was.
And one more thing, the really, really big
Yeah.
thing. Her reading coping skill is reading. Why are
Yes.
we here? Why are we here? We're talking about this because we love to read.
Yes.
Obviously, it's a
Yes.
skill of all three of ours that, her
That's
and
all I
her and
do.
the house have this just beautiful book exchange,
Well,
little
and
book
that's such
club.
a big thing between her, Gwen, and Emery too.
Yes.
Yes.
The
And
romance novels.
how they're trading their own smut. I just think it's funny
I
how in the book, in the smut book, she's making fun of smut books. And I'm just like, that
It's
is
very
so
funny.
funny.
Well, and
wow.
we didn't even get to talk fully like about her and Cassian's relationship. Honestly, I feel like there could be an entire podcast. Every episode is about Akatar,
I
but
mean, I just think we have to see
anyone
what happens
listening,
with their relationship at this point.
Yeah. Okay, I'm
Da, da,
like
da.
so curious about y'all's theories because I've never thought anything except
Oh,
her
oh,
and Cassian are
This
right.
has
So
been
send me
like a
some TikToks.
recent thought of he did not accept the thing, but and we did not see a mating ceremony.
where's the soup? Not
But
soup, but
she
like
gave him
food.
something.
He rejected it. Not
Oh, he
rejected it, but
did?
he didn't take it.
What was
And
it?
he said, she had like a piece of bread in her pocket. And he was like, oh, so I get this, or I get a full on mating or a full on big thing. I guess I'll take the big thing, but we haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
Is she gonna
interesting.
do to us what she did, what Sarah did with book 1 and 2, where we're headed into a wedding and then oops, doesn't happen.
And Eris shows up.
No, she doesn't want Eris.
We need to
I think it's
understand.
Cassian. I'm gonna die on that hill.
I mean,
But
I do think it's, but like,
She could go anywhere with the twist. Like the
everything
twist
is
is either
so
gonna be filming
I'm so sus until
or
things are final now at
yeah,
this point that like
yeah,
mm.
yeah. Also,
I also don't think that Lucian is her mate. So I don't know. I don't know.
guess we'll see.
Anyway. Well, thank you all so much for listening to this three-part situation
mega
of us
combo.
talking about Akatar. We could clearly talk about it all day long because the three of us really love this book series. If any overwhelming feelings came up for you during this podcast, we all encourage you to think about getting a therapist to talk to. There are great ways to search for therapists, including Psychology Today. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for therapy. We all might be therapists, but this is not therapy. This is for funsies. I want to give a special thank you to Melissa Adams for our podcast artwork and Crimson for our intro music. And we would love it if you gave us a follow on Facebook and Instagram at What the Feels to help us grow our community, and just tell your friends about What the Feels, and just let them know that what you're listening to. And if you're interested in joining our Patreon community, you can become a patron of What the Feels and enjoy some special perks. And I want to give a special thank you to Meagan and Bailee for committing to a 3-part series. What we didn't know was going to be a 3-part
Thank
series,
you.
but a 3-episode series of list talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses. Thank you both so much, and I hope to see you both soon. And we want to thank you all for listening, and we hope that you have a great day until the next time we see you on What the Feels.